I remember running into like a friend they were just doing really well in B2B sales, and they were like 21, 22, making about 150K. And I'm like, and at that moment, that was like another mental shift. And it was interesting. These little shifts right there made me realize I had these mental blocks in my head. I didn't realize there's more out there. I'm like, well, shoot. I mean, if someone like him, who I thought at least I was more skilled or better, harder working than he was, if he can make more than me, why can't I make that much money? Why do I need to wait till I'm 30 to make six figures?
What is up, mindset hackers? Thank you so much for joining me here today. I've got a very special guest, somebody that I admire and look up to. His name is Marcus Chan. He's been recognized as a top voice for LinkedIn, for Salesforce, and part of the Forbes Business Council. He's been featured in an extensive list of top sales and business publications. He's been promoted 10 times in 10 years before he started his own consulting company where he helps top sales reps and leaders supercharge their performance. Marcus Chan, thank you for joining me here today. How are you doing?
What's going on, Sam? I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for that awesome intro. I'm just a regular dude who's made a lot of mistakes, but I'm excited to jam out today with you.
That's awesome. That's what I love about you is you're so relatable. You're so easy to talk with. A little backstory of Marcus. I first read about him when I was researching some of the top sales influencers on LinkedIn. It came across an article written by you. I sent several people messages just letting them know what I took away from their articles. And Marcus sent me back a very warm video message and started following his content. It's been absolutely amazing. And what I discovered is he is an absolute mindset hacker. He uses mindset to help other sales reps attain the top of their game. I know that this has been a big part of your backstory. And I guess that's what I wanted to dig into first. What I love seeing is sometimes you'll post a photo of you back in the day driving the 97 Honda Accord before you started living the dream. And sometimes you talk about like having growing up in a little bit of a scarcity mindset, but now you're so abundant, my friend. Tell me a little bit more about how that evolved and how did you tap into that?
Yeah, what's interesting is you don't realize growing up how you become wired a certain way with certain belief systems, certain ideals, and just certain ways of thinking that you just don't realize they actually can limit you if you're not aware of them, to actually break these limiting beliefs. So for example, my parents, they immigrated from China and Taiwan, escaped the communist revolution. We grew up very poor, so we really didn't have much. So we definitely had a scarcity mindset, clipping coupons. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but clipping coupons, like always really scared, fearful of making decisions, and living just in a really, basically like we're basically broke. And over time, as my parents start to accumulate some money and build a little bit of wealth and create a better life for themselves, they still instill the same belief. Like, for example, even today, I mean, my dad's been retired for like almost 20 years. He still wears the same clothes he wore like 30 years ago. No joke. The same shirts, the same pants. They'll be threadbare and he'll still wear the same stuff because of just some of the belief system he has. So what was really interesting is, growing up, that's just how I thought, whatever we can cut corners and do ourselves, cut our own grass, whatever it's going to be about money or anything. It was always about just let's work hard and that's what we're going to do. And I remember one of the first ahas I had, which is really a mental shift of really realizing that there is more to life than just working your tail off to make money. And I remember especially early on, I remember being 19 years old. At this point, I'd been working for over a decade for my parents at their restaurant they had, do all these things. And we had these festivals that we would work at where we put in 15 to 20-hour days over the weekend. And I remember being 19, it's Sunday. We just had a long week. We had a week probably was a 100+ hour week. I am exhausted. We're in the garage in my parents' house, scrubbing dishes and pots and pans 1 a.m. on a Sunday night after a festival. And I'm in a bad mood. I'm in a bad mood because I'm 19 years old. You much rather go out and party, hang out with friends than to be washing dishes and pots and pans in your parents' garage on a Sunday. So my dad's like, "What's wrong?" I'm like, "Well, there's got to be more than this." Like, I'm like, I, I eventually, when I get older, I'm gonna find a way to make more money than just working on my feet all day, like working behind a stove in a kitchen. And my dad's like, "Yeah, I totally get that for sure. That's why you get to go to college, you got to finish school, etc." So I definitely started having this mental shift at that moment of realizing there was something better, because at this point my mental frame was go to college, get a good job, make good money or decent money, and kind of rise up the ranks. And what was very interesting was, at the time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. My parents wanted me to go into kind of the prototypical high paying roles of being a doctor, a lawyer, accountant, whatever. I didn't want to do any of those things. So, but in their mind, they're like, when you go to school and you work hard, that's a mental shift you can go into. You can use your brain, you can make the money, you can make great income, you can make a 6-figure income, you can live a very comfortable life, work for 40, 50 years, and then eventually retire. I'm like, okay, that seems to make sense. So that was kind of the path I started going down. In fact, actually, the first thing I actually had applied for architecture school at the time. Like, I thought I was going to be an architect, and actually ended up backing out and then going to business school eventually. But when I was about to graduate, I remember at that point, it was still like I still had a lot of those limiting beliefs as a kid. So I first started my B2B sales role, and I remember just like working my tail off and just like, like it wasn't making very much money. And I just figured over time I'll just get better at sales, maybe eventually make a better income. And I would get reinforced certain beliefs from my childhood about money and everything else. So for example, at that time, even with this whole thing, I remember thinking to myself, my goal, my boss right now is 45 years old. He's making just over $60,000. My goal is I'm going to make $100,000 by the time I'm 30. I'm like, if I do that, that'd be incredible, incredible. And then I remember, like, I started like reading these old school books, like, Think and Grow Rich and all these things about people making just so much money. I'm like, just that's outdated. And then I started to run into a couple people for like my past, and I remember this was like a shift. I remember running into like a friend they were just doing really well in B2B sales, and they were like 21, 22, making about 150K. And I'm like, and at that moment, that was like another mental shift. And it was interesting that these little things, these little shifts right there made me realize I had these mental blocks in my head. I didn't realize there's more out there. I'm like, well, shoot. I mean, if someone like him, who I thought at least I was more skilled or better, harder working than he was, if he can make more than me, why can't I make that much money? Why do I need to wait till I'm 30 to make 6 figures? So these are some of these shifts I started having. And then over time, as I started to fill my mind with the right things, started reprogramming my brain into thinking the right way, I started taking different actions and doing different things. And over time, I started hitting different milestones of, making more income, hitting 6 figures, buying a home early, doing all these things. And there's this progression over time. And in each level, as they continue to level up, I meet more people who are doing more than me. Right. So like, it's like you hit 100K, you're like, oh, I can do more. You meet people who do 150. Once you surpass that, you start realizing people do 200, 250, 500, a mil plus, and you start realizing that all these beliefs we had, we kind of limited ourselves because of the beliefs we had. But for me, it's been an ongoing journey. This is actually why I constantly am always looking to improve how I perceive things, to get a better perspective, to actually increase my mindset, to see the world in a better way. So it's kind of a long answer, but that's kind of the journey it's gone through over time. It's taken a long time to get to this point, but I'm still growing. I'm still going.
I love that. And you just gave me goosebumps. Oh my God. Cause I can relate to that so much. The first thing I'm hearing is that you started noticing these constructs, and a couple that I picked up on is I need to work harder to make more money.
Right.
And kind of the treadmill,
Yes.
work my ass off. And then another part I picked up on is like these levels of income, like 6 figures, 150, 200. And so every time you broke through one of those constructs that, either you imposed on yourself or maybe society imprinted on us, then you started to be like, aha, okay, that wasn't completely true. So what else can I break through? Right. One thing I know about you is you started, you really invest in yourself with coaches and surrounding yourself with the best possible people and just trying to think bigger. What you mentioned, Think and Grow Rich. So when you started to break through some of these paradigms, like what were you consuming at the time? Was it
Yeah.
coaching or was it like more just like I'm reading books? But what was it that just started to kind of like cause you to kind of chip away at some of those constructs and break through them?
So it was a combination of adding things to my life to make me think differently, but also removing things that didn't serve me. So that was a combination of both. So, for example, whenever you read the news, it's always negative and actually adds more constructs to your mind. So I stopped reading the
Yes.
news. I stopped reading the news. I stopped listening to the news. Now, and I still to this day, like, I don't know what's going on most of the time in the world, which is good and bad sometimes. But but at least the news is all biased, whatever. Anyways, so I started moving that type of stuff, and then I started introducing things at first. So first, it started with books, and it was I remember just reading some of the books and not being able to comprehend certain things simply because of the state of mind I was in. And I remember, for example, I remember reading this one book about how this guy became this like multimillionaire. And I know we keep talking about money, but money is a really simple way to kind of like tie to like it's a metric that everyone can understand. But I remember reading this book and this guy talked about how important time was and how he was willing to pay someone to cut his grass and clean his house for $10-15 an hour while he did other things that made him more money. Now, when you're only making like 29,500, which was what I was my base salary at the time, you really struggle justifying that in your mind. Like I remember when I started reading this, I'm like, yeah, that's because the guy's a multi-millionaire. That's how he's thinking now. But like, I'm this poor college kid who just graduated, who's like trying to make ends meet, trying to figure it out. I want to get married, I have these big goals, but I can't do that. And I become very limited. But what's interesting is like, it planted a seed in my mind. So books like, Think and Grow Rich, a lot of personal development, success books. Like what's interesting is being in B2B sales, I first started reading a lot of sales books and I realized it actually didn't serve me as much as personal development books. And it was reading books like Tony Robbins that really just started shifting how I started to think. Because he would ask different questions that caused me to really question what I believed in. And that was just a really powerful sort of mental shift from there. And then eventually, I went to like a Tony Robbins conference and it made me think differently. And over time, I started investing into like coaches and conferences and different online courses. Didn't really come to a little bit later on, but like different workshops and stuff that would really just start expanding my mind. And then from there, I started realizing on top of that, leveraging some of my internal resources, such as in my company, who is a peak performer or a high level exec, because I can connect with and learn from them because they made the mistakes. And what's interesting is when you're able to lean upon their proven experience, you're able to learn so much. It's because they've already driven the road and they can guide you. And it's absolutely amazing. But they also challenge you to think a different way. So I'll give you a really good example. Like this is another like false rule I built in my own head. And I remember the VP broke this like, belief for me. But I remember I was like, I've been having a lot of success in corporate America. I was like 24 years old at this time, come from a lot of different times, running a pretty decent sized team. And I remember I was feeling really frustrated. And because of the business that we were in, we were responsible for the full cycle, not just from prospect to close, but also to fulfillment and serving the customer and customer success as well. So it was an ongoing thing. And we would lease and rent box trucks and pickup trucks for companies that move product. And I remember like sometimes like a vehicle would break down over the weekend and then they would call my cell. Like the owner of the company that I closed or my team that closed, they call my cell and then I would race out there. I mean, there was times they'd be like 2 a.m. on a Saturday morning. I would like leave my apartment, race over to the office and help out a customer. And that would happen like at least every other weekend. I'll do that. And my girlfriend now, wife, now was like, "You're crazy. Why are you doing this?" And I'm like, I have to. This is my duty. It's my responsibility. I have to do this. These are the beliefs I instilled. And it's okay at first, but they started getting burnt out. And I remember feeling really burnt out. I'm like, oh my God, what am I doing? Like I'm working 80 hours a week. I'm doing all this stuff. I'm also trying to get my MBA at the same time. I hate this. And I remember our VP came in town. He's sitting me down because you can tell I'm just distraught. He's like, "What's going on with you?" And I'm like, "Well, I can't believe you guys are like this is all messed up. The customers are calling me on weekends, and they're like, I've been coming in the office at 2 a.m. on a Saturday. I'm leaving my friends, I'm leaving my family to come here and work on a weekend. Like it sucks. I can't believe it." And he looks at me and he asks me one question, and that question like just completely flipped me on my head. He said, "Marcus, who asked you to come in on Saturday? I'm like, well, the customer. He's like, no, who from the company asked you to answer your phone at 2 in the morning on a Saturday, come in? I'm like, no one. He's like, so why are you doing it? And I realized at that moment when he asked that, I had created this false rule and belief in my head that I had to work hard, I had to show up and take care of the customer at any cost. And that was causing actually my own pain as a result. So being able to talk to people who can have the outside perspective, who's walked the path, really helps start to shape new beliefs in my mind and making me realize. And I realized this over time because of some of these earlier beliefs of show up, work my tail off, etc., continue to bleed over even down the road. So even now, it still bleeds in even now. Like I still work my tail off. And my wife's like, why do you work so many hours? I'm like, because I have to. She's like, but it's your own schedule. I'm like, you're right. I should adjust my schedule a little bit because I've wired myself and I've created an identity for myself that I do work hard. So that's what I'm still working on consistently. But being aware of some of these bullshit rules, these rules can be powerful to uncover and then hopefully break them away from them so you can actually live a more fulfilling life.
Absolutely. And it's funny because when you say that, it kind of links back to what you're saying about like work, make a lot of money, work hard. So like your subconscious is kind of putting that stuff in front of you without you even realizing it. Sometimes you got to like step back and see that. And I can see the tie-in right there. That's amazing. And the other thing too is the learning through other people's mistakes. We always talk about like learning from our own mistakes, but like what you're talking about is you're leaning on you're uncoupling stuff that doesn't serve you, like media that just is super negative, getting rid of that, which increases bandwidth in your mind to spend consuming content that actually serves you. And then also really finding some good advisors, coaches, collaborators, people to lean on to help use their experience for you too. So two takeaways so far is just like, being aware of some of these constructs that we live in, like time equals money, or I've got to work hard if I want to succeed. I've got to hustle and grind, and then start questioning that and then break through one of them and then start to level up. And the next one is you have to learn by your own experience. I mean, that's great to always learn from your lessons, but learn from the lessons of others. So you crushed it in sales, 10 promotions in 10 years. You break off. I know this is where you really leaned in. You stepped into your higher self, started your own business. It was a little bit, scary for you. You did some planning to do this, and then you took the leap. But right, in the interim, there was some times where you really started to question things. What did you hold on to? What was your SOS to keep you going forward? I know that you mentioned the other day that there were times where you questioned what you were going to do. You started browsing, looking on LinkedIn, like maybe I got to go back into the sales world. But how does someone uncouple that? Like, what did you do? What was it that kept you from turning around? How did you build that belief system? Or how did you reinforce it when you were kind of panicking?
Yeah. So, fortunately, it's not my first time of making a major shift and going to basically trying something totally different and new, and potentially having everyone question me and challenge me and wonder what the heck I'm doing because it seemed like a terrible decision on paper on the outside. So I've done things to kind of help guide me, right? Because reality is as much as we like to say we don't do this, but I definitely associated my identity with my career, especially just the type of personality I am, like go-getter, goal-driven. I was really proud to say, yeah, I run a really big team. Yeah, I have tons of employees. Yeah, we deliver so much revenue. Yeah, I have a huge title and all these responsibilities. Yeah, I'm on corporate jets. Like there was a swagger and authority that came with that. And leaving that all behind, I knew it'd be really hard. I knew it'd be hard. I knew I would second guess it because there'd be certain things I'm like, man, I really like that I have a great car package and basically pay nothing for gas. Like that's a nice luxury. I really like to pay for my car. I really like that I get to have all those hotel points and flight points because of all my travel. Like those are those little things where you get accustomed to. So I remember when I made that leap, I knew it'd be really hard. Like I knew it'd be hard. I knew it'd be scary. I knew it'd probably be one of the scariest things I've ever done because now I couldn't rely upon the contracts and structure of a company to kind of lean upon. I couldn't rely upon a base salary. I couldn't rely upon anything. I mean, really, as the saying goes, there's a very fine line between being, unemployed and self-employed, right? Very fine line. I didn't have a team anymore. It's all on me. So I knew this would be really hard. So one simple trick, I actually learned this when I was getting my MBA, and is my very first class, and we had an amazing professor, and she was our first like crew, or crew that we had was like 10 people, and she said, "Hey everybody," this is years ago. She said, "Hey everybody, look around the room, look at each other." She said, within the first 6 months, like half of you guys are going to quit, not going to make it through, and by the end of the program, only maybe 20-30% actually going to make it through. Everyone else is going to drop out. I'm like, oh Jesus, it's only 10 people in this room. Like, that means like 8 people are probably not going to make it. I want to be one of the two. So she said, so the very first assignment, which seemed so silly at the time, but I did it anyways. She said, like, everyone, I want you to write a letter to yourself. Dear Simon, dear Marcus, and I want you to write out all the reasons why you're going to go and get your MBA, why you're willing to sacrifice your time after hours for working a long day on weekends. What is a greater goal? What is the why? What's the bigger drive? I want you to write the letter. That's what you got to do. Like, it lists everything in there. So I wrote this letter, and it was really interesting because she was spot on. Because I remember at the time when I was getting my MBA, I was working full time and everything else. I wanted to quit so many times. I mean, being 24 years old on the weekends, you want to go party after working all week. But I'm like, I have to like go and like do like all like 200 pages of reading all these projects. I need this. So I would pull, anytime I wanted to quit, I'd pull the letter out, I'd read it, and it would rejuvenate me. And that was really, really powerful. So when I quit corporate America, I did the exact same thing. I pulled like a blank Google Doc, and I wrote out a letter to myself. Exactly why I was willing to sacrifice the good because I was going for the great. But in addition to that, because I knew I needed to have some anchor points to reestablish my belief in myself, I also listed out all the major accomplishments of my career that I was most proud of. Every time I was able to overcome adversity, as reminders, like different achievements and awards, and I broke it all down. So not only was I able to like future pace myself in my greater goals and what I was going to go after, but I was also able to anchor myself back to what I've done in the past. And then I incorporate like some motivational quotes and stuff. I love stuff like that.
Oh, I love that. You call it a brag book, right?
Yeah, a brag book is definitely one version of it as well. So I have one of those physical ones as well. So this is like a letter myself. I only had bullet points. Bullet point 1, you did this. Mm-hmm. Bullet point 2, bullet point 3. It was like a sales letter to myself to convince myself that I can keep on going.
So I love that. What I'm really taking away from here is to prime yourself ahead of time, to know that sometimes the sea is not going to be smooth sailing. You're going to hit some rough weather, and it's like, okay, plan ahead for that. What are you going to do? How are you going to tether yourself and remind yourself that how badass you are? I love that. Okay. What's the difference between that and the brag? What is a brag book?
So a brag book is really it could be a digital version, or it could be a physical, like binder full, but it's a list of all your accomplishments. And this is ideally, I like visuals personally. So this could be, screenshots, emails, it could be printouts, awards, trophies, whatever it's going to be. So when you flip through, it's a reminder to yourself of how great you really are. Oftentimes when we are in the darkness of ourselves and we're second guessing ourselves, we forget what we've achieved. We forget how great we actually are. We forget of our skills. We start believing a false story in our mind. So if you can believe any type of story, why not reinforce the stories as that's actually happened already? So you reinforce stories that have already happened in your mind by going through that, and that's really powerful, lifting yourself up. So for example, even my office here, some people find it cheesy and lame, but I still have trophies at my office up here of accomplishments in the past as a reminder of a past life, a reminder that I was able to succeed and overcome certain things. I have even back there versus Chan as a jersey back there of how I was starting to second guess myself because I took up a brand new team and a whole new company. I could even do what I did before. And when we hit President's Club that year and my team gave me that jersey and they were so happy and we just broke all these records, I kept it as a reminder of the power of belief and execution when you're able to do those things consistently when you don't feel like it. So what you have to do is you have to instill these anchor points to reinforce it. So like I have other anchor points in my day as well that help me as well, from affirmations to goal review to visualization, and all those things again are future pacing me and help hold me accountable to my future self. Does that mean I don't have bad days where I second guess myself? No, definitely not. Especially the first 6 months where it's like trying to move a train at a dead stop. You're trying to push it. But if you do enough effort up front and then early on, I'm telling you, man, I read that letter like every other day. It seemed like I was reading like every other day to push myself through. But because I keep taking action, it doesn't mean it's perfect every day. Taking steps forward, even when it's not 100%, is still better than not moving at all. So over time, the momentum continues to build and build and build and build. And before you know it, then the engine keeps going. And then as long as you maintain it, then you're feeling really good. Like even today, I mean, now we have a small team of 4 other people plus me, so 5. I mean, do I still second guess myself? For sure. How I thought about go back to corporate America? Not as frequent. It's very rare now. But early on, 6 months ago, yeah, went to solopreneur all by myself, and it's just me. Yeah, totally. But it's one of those things where you start realizing if you know your weaknesses, can you reverse hack those weaknesses out to bring yourself to the greater state that you belong to be in?
Oh, there's so much goodness here. And I can totally relate to that too. You mentioned you were reading a lot of business books and then kind of transitioned into personal development. It's interesting because we have very similar paths. I'm probably not as far as on the journey as you, but very much in common. I remember I was getting really into finance, reading everything by Warren Buffett, by all the, financial gurus. And it got to the point where I'm just like, God, I feel like I'm reading the same shit over and over.
Right.
And then early when I was younger, I was all into Tony Robbins too. I remember having the tapes and listening to that. And then something kind of got me back into that. And then I was like, I wonder what my life would look like if I just got obsessed with mindset. Yeah. And what unfolded was absolutely phenomenal. Like I was doing well at work in my sales role. I think I hit President's Club like 5 times in a row, doubled it a couple times. And then that 5th year, the 6th year, when I started really investing in mindset, like I added about 35% over my 5-year sales average. And it was just like an absolute game changer. So I'm preaching this stuff inside of my sales organization, outside of my sales organization. With that said, I had a few questions about sales as it relates to mindset. My first question is, I want to get a picture of what it looks like for most sales organizations. As far as mindset, I always hear people say, you know what, whether it's sales or other areas, it's like, yeah, mindset is everything. It's 80%. And then it's 20% tactics or 20% strategy. What are most sales organizations doing to prepare their sales reps? Is it kind of like based like this is going to get you out the door, and then everything after that you're going to have to go outsource and figure out on your own? Or what do most like big enterprise type companies do to train their reps to prepare for those mental battles that they have or that they're going to have?
Yeah. Well, I find most of them don't do much. They don't do much. They may have like maybe an informal mentorship program. They don't really have much training around them or enough dialogue. They don't have much internal coaching from their sales leader. So they are pretty much left to fend for themselves, which is really scary, which is really, really scary. Or the advice they're giving is like super fluffy. So, for example, like it's easy to say, yeah, it's all mindset game. Have the right mindset, we can win the day and have a great day. Cool. But how do you actually win the day? How do you actually set the right mindset up? So I'll give you a really good example. So today, I'm on my coach call, running my team call with my inner circle members, and we have this guy Brad, and Brad's been in the program for 11 months now, and he's one of those guys where we part of our what we train on is how to peak perform routine, mentally, physically, emotionally, and everything else. And he would start it really well and then drop off. Start really well and drop off. And it's funny because he's reflecting on the year. He's like, Marcus, he's like, I feel like I've been on a treadmill now the last several months. It's a hamster wheel, etc. And he's like, I feel like I'm not making any progress. We start diving into his numbers, and it turns out he's added additional 1.1 million to his company in this past 10 months. And he just didn't really think about it for a second, right? That's the first piece. He's like, wow. I'm like, even if you weren't necessarily your best version of yourself, you still increase your results. But I was like, second though, let's talk about tactically. How do you reframe your mindset? Because it sounds great. Yeah, you know what? Just get back to the routine just talking about, and you'll be right as rain. Well, the truth is we get busy. So very tactfully, we discussed. I literally asked him. I said, hey, so with the week going so crazy all the time, every single day, every single month, etc., how often are you sitting down for 20 to 30 minutes and doing nothing else but thinking and reflecting on what went well and what can you improve? And he's looked at me, he's like, oh, I guess I probably haven't done it. I'm like, normal. I mean, once you get in the routine thing that happens, I'm like, this is what I want you to do. I'm like, I want you to on your calendar just block out 30 minutes and have no other plans. Don't be on email. You shut off all notifications and you just take out a pen, pad of paper, or Google Doc. Just turn off all notifications, and I want you just to write out what went really well over last week. What were the decisions you made? What did not go well, and what do you do differently? Do that every single week. And the cool part is he hasn't done it yet, but I know by him doing this, this is going to help him reshape. It's going to force him to pause, number one, be in the moment, but also reshift how he's thinking. So these are the things that, in general, in enterprise owners, they're not talking about these type of things. They might think it's too fluffy, too whatever, whatever, But the reality is these are the things that actually make you better. Like when I was running a really big sales org, like I had what I call my protected hour, and my admin knew every single Friday, 3 to 4 p.m. she could not book a single thing because that was my protected hour, in which I did the exact same thing I just told him to do, like pausing, reflecting, and really thinking, and just giving yourself space to really digest it all, and also to be able to think ahead. And when you give yourself time to think, this is actually when the creative juices start flowing. And it's so powerful what happens, because then you're able to really become better and be more aware of what you are actually doing every single day.
Oh, I love that. Here's one thing that I see a lot of too is it feels like a leader is more wants it more than their employee.
True.
Right. So it feels like, gosh, I can't want it more than you do. I'm sure you hear that a lot. What if a leader feels like that? How do they inspire or motivate their employee to want it more than they do?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is it can happen, right? So it really starts with a couple different areas. So I think number one, as a leader, it starts with hiring. That's number one, because when you hire someone, having someone who has an internal drive and fire is way easier to lead them, because they're going to apply what's called discretionary effort a lot easier than someone who you have to like drag and pull to the finish line. And those drag and pull people are like, they're the worst, because they actually sap your energy and they hurt the team, and they actually bring down team morale. So the first step is, number one, making sure you hire people who are actually self-driven and have the motivation, and they're able to articulate to you what they're actually driven by. And it has to be beyond extrinsic things. It really needs to be intrinsic. So, for example, when I was in for sales roles, it was really obvious to make me an offer, because they're like, dude, this guy will work his tail off to do whatever. He's driven on a different level. His motor is so high, runs so hard. We don't need to motivate him much. Like I even told my boss at one point, I'm like, it doesn't matter what incentives you give me, I will work my tail off and get results. And he's like, all right, it makes sense. Like, because the internal drive was beyond the extrinsic, dangling carrot, if you will. Okay. So that's the first piece. The second piece is, once you hire someone, I believe is one of the most important things you do when you hire someone is you want to sit down with them, and you do want to uncover with crystal clear clarity what exactly are those intrinsic drivers. What really drives them to get out of bed if it's snowing outside, pouring down rain, to get out of bed and get to work. And it can't be just chasing after something shiny like that. Those are extrinsic things. It has to be intrinsic. So uncover those intrinsic motivators are. And a lot of times they can be, a lot of times it's like status, something that's like, it's going to make them feel good about themselves. Like in general, most people don't realize it, but every decision they make is usually based off status, to either maintain their status level or increase their status level. So you uncover what really drives them intrinsically, but also uncover what are their actual extrinsic goals and what do they want to achieve, but also why they want to achieve it. What does it actually mean for them? So for example, let's just say if they tell you, oh, Simon, my goal is I want to earn $200,000 a year. That sounds cool. What's the significance of that number? Well, it's just I've never done before. Okay. Well, why that number specifically? But you could have said 201, 250, 198. Why 200? So you start diving deep as a leader to uncover what does that really mean? And what's interesting is when you start doing this, you uncover certain things like, well, my best friend made 175 last year and we're really competitive and I can't let him beat me. Okay, that's okay. If that's me, one of your drivers to not let your buddy beat you, that's fine. So you start uncovering some of these extrinsic, but also the intrinsic that's tied to it. And then from there, uncover as well, where do they want to go with their life? And what skills they need to get there? What skills do they need to get to develop to get to that point of their next level of themselves? And then as a leader, you have to do whatever you can to build those skills and drive towards what's going to fulfill the intrinsic needs and also drive towards the extrinsic. And when you can uncover exactly what those pieces are, this will help you be able to lead them more effectively because now you know what actually makes them move. And when you understand that, you're able to lead to a whole other level because now they're more open to apply discretionary effort, which is going to help you with your business and the sales team you run. So, for example, I had this rep who, let me back up. So, the mistakes that people make is they say, I want my reps to like buy really expensive cars and they'll have this debt and they're going to like, then they'll crush it hard. Yeah, maybe, but that's not really enough. That's a weird type of pressure. It also may lead them to do like weird, sleazy things, which you don't want. So I had this one rep, his name was Forrest, really good guy, very low cost of living, like important, like, most people need to make at least $80,000 to $100,000 to have an okay life. This guy, Forrest, great guy. He was so like frugal how he spent money. He can live off like 30, 40K and just have a great life, just be super happy. Like that was like, he was set. So him coming in the base salary, he's already like feeling really good already because his expectations of the income is really, really low. So I knew for him, it wasn't about the money. He didn't care. He lived very simply. It wasn't about motivating with money. But for him, what was really important is he wanted to feel smart. He wanted to feel he was smart and contributing to the team. And I knew that. So I leveraged that in a good way. I made sure to tap into his skill set of leveraging what made him feel really good about being smart, training the team. And here's the thing. What happens is there's something called consistency bias, which is one of Robert Cialdini's laws of influence. People want to be consistent with what they believe in. So when he's out there training our team on certain things, he himself feels like he must also do it in action. So as a result, his first full year ended up making 130K plus. He made more money he's ever made before because I was making sure he was consistent with the things that he was bringing to the table by understand his intrinsic drivers. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting because a lot of people out there, in fact, I did this today. I had, a chat with our team and we were talking about, big, bold visions of 2022. What's that going to look like? What's going to be big and bold? Yeah. What can this vehicle do for you? And a common thing that we hear, not just today, but in general is like, yeah, I want to break six figures. And that's not just in sales, but a lot of times you hear that from, coaches or business. Like, I want to break six figures. And you're totally right. It's like, well, why? Yeah. Why? Because is that number, does it just sound cool or why is that? What's the motivator? Right. And you're talking about like, yeah, let's peel back the onion skin. Let's like peel back those layers and see what's at the core. I love that. I've got two more questions for you. First one is, what are the biggest limiting beliefs or stories that you hear people where you're just like, that's bullshit? Like what is it that you hear that holds people back the most? Maybe give me 2 or 3 examples of limiting beliefs or stories from sales reps.
There are definitely tons. One is I'll just figure it out on my own. Like that's really, really common. Like I can get my knowledge from like YouTube, LinkedIn, whatever, and I'll be able to be successful. Is that possible? Yeah, possibly. But the truth is, if it was that easy to YouTube your way to success, then every single sales rep would be a millionaire retired by 30. But they're not. And the truth is in today's time, especially, we have actually information overabundance. And what people really need is like clarity to exactly what to do to get to where they want to go. So that's probably one of the first limiting beliefs is like just believing, yeah, I'll be able to figure it out. Or the second limiting belief I would say is probably they believe time will train them. Oh, over time, I'll figure it out. Well, the mistake a lot of people make is time is actually not always the greatest teacher. Like if you're a bad parent, having a 20-year-old doesn't mean you were a great parent for 20 years. You might still have a bad kid at 20. You just repeat the same bad things over and over and over. So time is not a guarantee of becoming a better version of you. So it's understanding that is just a limiting belief that time, like experience and time will definitely get you there. Because I've definitely, I've met a lot of people who are, significantly older than me, who's been in sales for 25, 30 years, and they basically have repeated the first year 20, 30 times. They never seem to really surpass that level of income or success that they want, and actually it hurts them back. So those are a couple of limiting beliefs for sure. I would say there's also going to be, limiting beliefs of, do I actually have the skills to do it? And does that person have something that I don't have? Like, are they a better speaker? Are they a better presenter? Do they have a better territory? So there are these internal limiting beliefs of what's actually possible for themselves, but also these external limiting beliefs that that person is able to be successful because of whatever reason. So, for example, I remember, when I started getting sales, I really struggled at first. Eventually, I figured I had success, and then eventually I took over a team. And one of the newer people on the team, because I was also a bad leader, because I was trying to figure out leadership. She didn't really fall in line with what I was trying to teach her and coach her at the time, because I was also really bad at coaching. And eventually, over time, she eventually trusted me. But she told me that, she told me one of her limiting beliefs was, she's like, well, I'm not like you. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, I'm not outgoing. Like, I'm not an extrovert. Like, I don't have the gift of the gab. And I'm like, what? I'm like, I'm actually a tested ambivert. And I grew up with a speech impediment. I didn't start speaking until I was 4.5 years old, and with speech therapy for years. So I'm like shocked even saying this. And it like blew her mind, right? Because she had created this limiting belief that because of success she had saw, that I was just somehow gifted and born a certain way. She just happened to come in after I started figuring out how to sell. If she had started before, she would have saw how terrible I was. So those are some of the things I see as really common across the board, from like, a lot of reps across the board blaming, I don't know if I could do this. I don't have that skill set. Or, if I want to be successful, I need to be sleazy like that person, or I'm not going to be like this. I might want to sacrifice this. And those are just limiting beliefs people create. That's just a story they put in their own mind that holds them back from actually their true greatness.
Absolutely. And that's going to lead into my last question, but really quick, what I picked up on there, you even used this word, is it's because. And I did a mindset training with a team a week ago, and I was talking about like statements versus questions. Yes. And a lot of times, like, statements can be judgments, right? Like, if, Marcus is this good because he's naturally gifted, instead of like, why I like having you on here too, is I like looking at it like, Marcus, how did you do that? What can I learn? What's the gap? How can I figure that out? So I think it's really important to make that distinction. Are you, if you're using statements, are they words of affirmation, or are they judgments? When we place judgment, we're usually saying it's because, or it's some type of an excuse. It's, like you're saying this is the reason why you're not going to succeed, or why that person is succeeding, instead of like, looking up to them and wanting to know what they're doing and stepping into that. Right. I love that. So I mentioned words of affirmation. My last question for you, I want to ask you about your affirmations. For me, and I think you'll relate to this, it's so funny because I love that we both do that, because I don't want people to feel weird about that, right? Like, words are expressions of our thoughts. And so why not monitor those and make sure that they're serving us? And a couple of my affirmations is, I always say, like, I can go harder. If they can do this, I can do this too. I can figure this out. I will do whatever it takes. And I have those 4 affirmations. They're actually printed above my shower, because I take a cold shower in the morning, and I say those as I thump my chest. And right now it's like really cold. We had like about 2 feet of snow today. It's like, those pipes are cold, and I'll just get in there and I'll affirm to myself that I can figure that out. And you talked about how you like to reverse engineer, like, what's the final result in reverse engineering that. And I love like the mindset of like, I can figure this out. So my last question to you is, tell me like some affirmations that light you up and serve you.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting is it's shifted over time, right? And I think what's important is for everyone, whatever affirmations you have to connect with it. Like you have to feel that affirmation for yourself. So sometimes when people hear like other affirmations, because I would hear other people's affirmations, I'm like, oh, yeah, I don't really connect with that. I'm not really sure about that. So it's got to be something for you. So for me, I have different ones like, I am the best version of myself. I'm going to serve 100% of all my clients today. I'm going to show up and be the best version of me. Stuff like that to me is so powerful. Like it's so simple and it's what I need. Like one of my personal favorites, right? I say every single day for the last 3 years last 2 years is I'm an 8-figure entrepreneur. I'm an 8-figure entrepreneur. I'm an 8-figure entrepreneur. And to me, it's like it's this reaffirmation, and that one's past tense too, right? That one's past tense, like or it's a present tense. So I'm saying it because I believe it, and I'll say it to the point where even if I don't believe it to begin with, I'm gonna say it so eventually I'll train my mind to believe it. And the thing is, your brain's so powerful. Like you just need like, you can tell yourself so many stories. You can tell yourself negative ones or positive ones, but you choose. So you want to choose affirmations. When you say them, they fill you with energy and they make you want to go and run through a wall after you say them.
Absolutely. So use emotion. Don't just, I think some people go down like we do with calls or outreach, right? Like there's box checking and then there's saying it with like emotion and meaning and feeling and ones that resonate with you. And if you say, your affirmations, like, once a day, you're telling yourself like either a positive story or a negative story, like 365 times a day. And, it's kind of like a song that you hear and it gets, like a jingle or whatever. And all of a sudden you're like repeating in your head. Why not use affirmations to do that? I love that. I really hope that a lot of people in my sales organization listen to this and really take a lot out of this, because I know I sure have. If that happens and they want to follow you, what's the easiest way to tap into some of your content?
Absolutely. So definitely head over to find me on LinkedIn. It's my most active platform. Just look at Marcus Chan, pretty easy to find. You also head over to my website as well, which is sixfiguresalesacademy.com. You'll have access to like all my free trainings. I got tons of free training and resources to help you absolutely crush it in sales.
That's amazing. I have enjoyed this so much. Mindset Hackers, thank you so much for joining us here today. Please hit the subscribe button. Make sure that you share this with somebody who will resonate with this. And I appreciate you, and I will see you on the next episode.